Today I want to talk about what's going to happen to you psychologically when you're actually trying to get gigs. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's session. What's going to happen is when you're trying to get gigs, most of the problems are going to be psychological in terms of how do I get the gigs and what's the process, and you're going to have all this frustration inside of your brain. So if you're not prepared for that, what can happen is you'll kind of get blindsided and you'll end up giving up. And so I realized, like, hey, we're talking about here's the steps that you take to actually get gigs, but I never really talk about the psychological aspect of what's going to happen to you, like literally what's going to happen mentally. And if you can overcome this aspect, then everything else is going to be a lot easier. And so that's what I want to talk more of when it comes to just marketing yourself. The more I talk with people in terms of marketing with all these entrepreneurs in every industry, whether it's a realtor, insurance agent, a speaker, coach, consultant, doesn't matter. In any industry, I keep talking with people, and I notice that 99% of their problem is literally psychological. The actual things that you have to do to get what you want are actually really easy in terms of, well, it's simple in terms of what it is you need to do. And a lot of times people realize they need to do that thing. They're like, oh, I need to send out emails, or I need to cold call, or I need to build a list or something. They know what they need to do, but for some reason you're not doing it. And so if you're not prepared for what's about to happen to you mentally, especially in the sales game, then you're just naturally going to give up. The reason why, well, sales in general, it has the highest turnover rate in every industry, like literally any industry. If you look at the sales industry, they're always hiring people just because people are always quitting. And people are quitting because they're getting into it thinking, oh, I'm going to get rich. Like, I'm going to make so much money. Top salespeople make a ton of money. They're thinking I'm going to make a ton of money. Then they realize it was a lot harder than I thought. And then they're just like, let me go get a different job, right? And so that's what happens with people in the sales industry. And then when you're trying to market yourself as an entrepreneur, you're trying to build your business, speaking business, any type of business, you're trying to do all the sales stuff, prospecting, cold calling, all this stuff, and then you're not prepared for the mental game, and then you do the same thing that all the other people do. You're just like, forget it, and then you just go and switch to something else. So that's why I really want to talk about the mental game and prepare you guys for that. When you're ready, like when you can anticipate what's about to happen, it doesn't phase you. And so this is why I talked about a while ago where I mentioned, imagine if you're in a race and you know that you're running a marathon. You know that it's 26 miles. Like, if you know that, then you're prepared. You're like, okay, I'm going to pace myself at first. Like, you're prepared. But if you don't know that, if you don't know that it's 26 miles and you're thinking you got to run only a mile or maybe 2 miles, maybe 3 at the most, then what's going to happen is you're going to get there. You're going to be like, dang, what the heck? This is taking longer than I thought. For some reason, I don't see the finish line. And then you're just going to kind of give up. And so if you're prepared for what's going to happen to you mentally, you're more likely to succeed in general. And so that's what I want to talk about in terms of preparing you guys mentally for what's about to happen when you're actually trying to get gigs, when you're prospecting to get gigs. And I think everybody tends to go through this. It's just a matter of how fast you go through it. And once you go through it and you get to the end, you're like, oh, this is a lot easier than I thought. Like, you'll literally realize that you were the reason for why you aren't successful. Like, that is literally what's going to happen to you. You're going to sit there and think, why did I make this so damn hard? Because it's not really that hard. It's just a matter of being very simple, and then bam, you kind of just get straight into it. So here's what's going to happen to you mentally. And when you either join a program or when you're literally ready to actually start marketing yourself, to start getting gigs, what's going to happen is you're going to get excited in the beginning. You're like, all right, I'm ready. This dude, Benji, keeps talking about outreach and all this stuff, reaching out to events. I'm ready. Let me start contacting some people. I'm going to get myself booked. Let's go. This is a new year. New Year's coming up. New year, new life. All right, let's go. So you're going to be all ready. You're going to be excited as all hell, right? You're going to get everything ready, all your ducks in a row. You're going to sit there planning stuff, get all your ducks in a row. You're ready to go. You're excited. Then what's going to happen is you're going to start finding events, right? So let's say you went through the training, you know how to find events at this point. So like, let's say you're going to start finding events, but it's going to take you longer than you thought. You're like, what the heck, Ben, you talking about contacting 100 events a day? I'm struggling to freaking just find 10 events a day, right? So in the beginning, you're going to start finding events, but you're not going to find a lot of events. And you're going to start to ask these self-doubting questions. These are questions, I call them useless questions, mostly because they're useless in that very moment, not because they're just useless in general. But because when you ask the question, it's usually a question that it's literally useless. Almost like, imagine you start a business, right? You start a business and you say, or let's say you're talking to Jeff Bezos. You're like, hey, Jeff, I was wondering, like, how do you manage all those employees that you have? I mean, like, dang, you got a lot of employees. How do you manage everybody? The answer that comes out of his mouth doesn't make any sense to you. Like, it literally means nothing to you because he's managing thousands of people. You haven't even started selling yet. And so you're asking a question that doesn't matter at that moment. Or another useless question that I always think of is when you ask questions that the answer would be clear to you if you did something. Like if you literally just did something, if you did what you were supposed to do, the answer would have been immediately apparent to you. But because you didn't do it, you're asking these self-doubting questions where it just makes no sense. So these are questions like when people say, like, how do I find emails, right? When someone asks me that question, they're like, all right, I mean, how do I find emails to these events? Like if I go to the website, how do I find an email? I'm thinking to myself, go to the contact page. I don't know, maybe there's an email somewhere on the contact page. And so that's what I'm thinking. And the only reason someone would ask that is because they've never gone to the contact page. They're thinking inside their head. They're trying to visualize everything in their head. They're thinking, okay, all right, when I sit down and when I try to find events, how do I find emails? If they would have just done it, if they would have just went to a website, they would have noticed, hey, here's the freaking contact information, right? So it's questions like that where people ask them where it's very clear that they haven't done anything, right? So what happens is in the beginning, you're excited, you're ready to go. Then you start finally like contacting, but it's not going as fast as you want because you're like, how do I know they pay? And how do I find the events? And who do I talk to? So you're asking these self-doubting questions, right? And that's one of the reasons why you're going so slow, because you're asking these self-doubting questions. And then in an hour, you only find 10 events. And you're like, dang, what the heck? I found 10 events, but it took me forever. What the heck? And the only reason you found very few events is just because you're doing it wrong. And so at this point, you don't really know that though, right? You're just like, oh, dang, all right. Well, at least I found 10 events, right? So you start contacting those events. You're like, all right, fine. Let me pitch them, right? Benji talked about this cold email thing. Let me pitch them. So you start pitching them, right? But most of them don't respond to you. And so they either just completely ignore you, they don't open your emails, they maybe click on the website, but they just don't really respond to you. Now, a few of them may respond, right? But they don't respond by saying yes. They don't respond by saying, oh, yeah, sure, we're definitely going to bring you in. We definitely want to hire you as a speaker. They don't respond in that way. And so it's just not an immediate yes. So you're not thinking like, oh, this works. Like, oh, it really works, right? A week goes by and you're finding events. Like, even though it's slow, you're still finding some events. And as you find the events, you contact them, you're sitting there pitching them, but still nobody really bites. Like you got a couple of responses. People like, yeah, I mean, I'm in charge, and oh yeah, we'll keep your information on file, and like a couple of responses like that. But nothing where people are like, all right, let's book you. Like, yes, here's the check, right? So you haven't gotten really a response like that yet. This is when self-doubt starts to kick in. This is when you start to wonder, does this crap even work? Does cold emailing even work? Does cold calling even work? Does Google Ads even work? You start to wonder, like, does this stuff even work? And you're not blaming yourself. You're blaming the thing. You're blaming cold email and cold calling, Google AdWords, Facebook ads, whatever it is. You're blaming the thing, right? You're not blaming yourself at this moment. You started contacting people. You're like, wow, this thing's not working. And for some reason, you're like, oh, it's not working. You have no idea why it's not working. And at this point, you start to slow down. This when instead of you contacting, let's say you did at least 100 a week. Instead of doing that, you now get down to 10 a week, right? Because you're not sure if it works. You're wondering like, oh, so far I haven't really gotten any gigs yet. I've been trying this. It hasn't worked. And so you start to slow down. Instead of contacting a ton of people every day, you only contact very little every single day. So now it's like it turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy, because at this moment, you're not contacting enough people, right? It's like you want to become the greatest basketball player in the world. You're excited in the beginning. You start practicing 10 hours a day, and then in a week, you can't beat Michael Jordan yet. So you're like, oh, dang it. Well, something's wrong. So instead of you practicing 10 hours a day, you drop down to 10 minutes a day. At that moment, you're really screwed because you're practicing like very little. So you're not going to get all that good. So the same goes with prospecting. You get to a point where all that self-doubt creeps in. And instead of you contacting so many people, you contact even less. And so it has a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point. This is the moment when the shiny object syndrome comes into play. This is the moment when you start to think about content, when you start to think, maybe I should just put a podcast out. Maybe I should create some content. Maybe I should do all this video stuff, right? So you start to think of other things like podcasts, the videos, and building your list, all these other things that don't actually help you get on a stage, but you start to think in terms of shiny object syndrome, you start thinking about one of those things. And then what happens is people tend to switch to that shiny object thing, right? Because they think, you know what, let me do that and then I'll come back to this. That's what happens. Let me create a podcast real quick. I know Benji says not to do that, but let me do it anyways. Let me create a podcast real quick and then I'll just come back to this. And so they create a podcast or whatever it is they create. Then what happens is the cycle repeats itself. So they start creating podcast episodes. People aren't listening, watching. They're like, what am I doing wrong? All the self-doubt pops into play. Shiny object syndrome eventually kicks in again, right? And so it's just this cycle that repeats over and over. It's not just prospecting, it's everything. And so you got to be prepared for that. If you're not prepared for the mental struggle, what will happen is you will give up. Like it's inevitable. You will give up if you're not prepared for the mental struggle. What happens is there's a lot of uncertainty at the beginning. So when you're doing anything, especially prospecting, when you're creating content, there isn't too much uncertainty. Of course there is, but there's not a lot because you feel like you're actually doing something. When you produce a podcast episode or when you're, I got to fix this freaking Instagram thing. This thing is acting all weird here. It's like, all right, there we go. But when you actually start producing stuff, like when you're producing content, there's not too much uncertainty because you feel like you're doing something. Whereas when you're prospecting and you're sending out emails or cold calling, you're not getting the results that you want. Like nobody's actually hired you within a week or 2 weeks yet. And so you naturally start to think like, what's going on? What am I doing wrong? So a lot of uncertainty starts to just kick in, uncertainty and just self-doubt in general. You're not sure if it works. You're not sure how to pitch. You're not sure how to use your CRM. Some of you don't even know what a CRM is. I mean, you're not really sure how many events you need to contact to actually get hired. There's all this stuff that's popping inside of your head. You're literally just not sure of stuff. Like literally, what do I say? Oh, like how do I follow up? How do I use a CRM? You're just not sure in the beginning. And you have to literally overcome this uncertainty almost to the point where you ignore it, right? Uncertainty doesn't go away. It's one of those things where you ignore. It's very similar to like how people are afraid of public speaking, right? So there's people who are afraid of public speaking and they get on stage or they're about to get on stage and they're scared like, oh my goodness, right? There's all these nerves. Then there's another speaker who's a professional speaker. It's not that he doesn't feel those things. He just sees those nerves as something very different. He sees it as like he's excited. Whereas the person who's afraid of public speaking, they see it as like, oh no, people are going to laugh at me or whatever, right? And so you're sitting here. It's just a matter of how you see it. And so the same goes with uncertainty. Most people, they get uncertain and then they just stop, right? They're like, well, I don't really know how to send an email. I don't know how to pitch. I don't know how to use a CRM thing. I don't even know if they pay. There's a lot of stuff that you don't know. And then they kind of just stop at that moment. Whereas you need to say, okay, there's a lot of stuff I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out as I go, right? You figure it out as you go. And so this is where the frustration comes into play. The beginning part of you doing anything, you're going to be frustrated. So especially when you're prospecting, I'm telling you, you're going to be frustrated as all hell, like a whole new level of frustration. And it's going to be because of everything. Like your pitch is going to suck. Everything is going to suck in the beginning. You're going to go slow in the beginning. Everything is going to suck in the beginning. And so you're going to get frustrated. And so you essentially have to ignore that. And what happens is you become certain through competence. So the more you do it, the more certain you're going to become that you can get it done. And that's why when people start to slow down in the beginning, when they're prospecting, they're sitting there, they're sending out a ton of emails and they go slower. They're practicing 10 hours a day. Then they go from 10 hours a day to 10 minutes a day. When that happens, they're doing less, which just makes everything worse. On the other hand, if you keep doing as much or more, because you're getting that practice in, it translates into competence, right? So the more events you find, the more you know how to find. The more events you contact, the more you know how to pitch you. The more you know how to contact them. It's just The more you contact, the more you know how to pitch you, the more you know how to get them to click on a link to your website. The more you do it, the more competent you get at it. And so that's why, like, in the beginning, you have to be okay with the frustration, with the uncertainty in the beginning, because you can't slow down. If you slow down, you're going to do less, and then you won't have any competence. You just won't build up the skill in any way. Like in the beginning, I mean, I was uncertain as all hell in the beginning, right? And it was mostly because of all the bad information out there. Like there was really no. Back then, there was really nobody really teaching good marketing for speakers, really. It was just a matter of have a promo packet and give people your promo packet. It wasn't anything really strategic. It was like, hey, you can call people and that was it, and give them your promo packet, like mail them your promo packet. That was pretty much it. There was no scripts, no nothing, no CRM, no talk of a CRM. Nobody knew a damn thing about a CRM. Nobody talked about CRM, nothing, right? And so back then, I was uncertain with everything. How do I know they pay? Like, what do I say to them? How do I follow up with them? Every single thought that's in your brain, that was mine as well. Probably times 10, to be honest, because I didn't have a job to fall back on, which I'll get to in just a second. But in the beginning, I was uncertain about everything as well. The way I figured it out is I just kept emailing. I kept contacting people. I knew that emailing worked. I knew cold calling and cold emailing worked. It was just a matter of, can I get it to work? Like, I need to hurry up and get this thing to work. And so in the beginning, I was uncertain as all hell. That's why I keep telling everybody, you guys got to build systems. When you build systems, you're no longer uncertain about what you need to do. You know, here's the process. You know, your CRM has a pipeline of incoming questions, quote, contract, close. So you know that's the process. You follow that every single time, no matter what, every time. That removes some of the uncertainty. You know you have all these email templates. Here's the first email I'm going to send out. If they ignore me, I'm going to send this one out. If they ignore me again, I'm going to send this one out. When I send a quote and they ignore me again, I'm going to send this one out, right? So you have all these templates, which creates certainty inside of you, right? And so that's why I keep saying, like, create the systems. If you're not a member of the Speak Pro Academy, you create systems yourself. And so in the beginning, it's always slow because you don't know if what you're doing is right. And in the beginning, you do have to go slow to make sure you're doing it the right way. That way you don't put in all these bad habits and everything into what you're doing. So in the beginning, you do go slow until you realize, hey, this is actually the right way to do it. Then you pick up the pace. Then you start going faster. And what's going to happen, like I said earlier, a lot of self-doubt is going to kick in when you're prospecting. This is just natural. I mean, a gangload of freaking self-doubt is going to kick in when you're prospecting. This is why I talk about delusional practicality, where you're delusional in a point where your self-belief of yourself is like, it's insane. It doesn't even make sense. Like, you have so much self-belief in yourself, it doesn't even make sense. And we're actually going to do a whole Facebook Live on self-belief this week. But basically what's going to happen is a lot of self-doubt is going to kick in. And the reason the self-doubt is going to kick in is because you have someone here saying cold emailing or cold calling or whatever, this thing works, right? You have someone saying it works, like me, right? I'm saying cold emailing definitely works. You try it, but it's not working for you. You're like, he said it works, but it's not working for me. And so what happens is people never blame themselves for why something isn't working. It's very rare that someone blames themselves for why it's not working. But the reason things don't work is because you literally aren't doing it right. Literally. That is literally the reason why it doesn't work. If you are cold emailing, cold calling, doing Facebook ads, Google ads, SEO, webinars, sales videos, any of that stuff, you're doing any of that stuff and it's not working, it's because you're not doing it right. That's just what it comes down to. But in the beginning, the self-doubt is you're going to blame that thing. You're going to say, oh, webinars don't work, or oh, cold email doesn't work. You're going to blame that thing, and you have to stop doing that, because the more you blame a thing outside of you, the less likely you're going to be able to change the situation that you're in. And so you got to stop blaming other things, other people. The self-doubt is going to kick in as well because you don't understand the numbers game. So remember what I mentioned with the marathon. So where I said, imagine there's 26 miles you have to run. If you understand that, then you're prepared for it. If, on the other hand, you think you only have to run 1 mile or 2 miles, you're just over here, even though you got to do all this, you're just like, I just got to do this, right? If you think you only have to do this, then when you do that and even a little bit more, and you don't get the results, you're going to the self-doubt is going to kick in. This shit isn't working, right? On the other hand, if you understand that this is what you have to do, then even when you're right here, you're going to realize, hey, I still haven't done enough, right? So when you realize sending 5 emails a day is not enough, when you realize that, you're like, okay, I got to send like 100 a day, right? When you realize that it is part of a numbers game, especially in the beginning, it is kind of a numbers game. When you realize that, then you're more likely to do more. And so this is why the self-doubt kicks in, because you don't think, hey, I'm running a marathon. You're thinking I'm running a mile. So when you do just get a little bit, you're like, this crap doesn't work. What the hell, right? And so you need to just learn to ignore self-doubt. I think probably meditation helps in terms of ignoring self-doubt. Either meditation or doing the exact opposite of having so much self-belief that people call you arrogant. It's either one of those, right? To where you ignore self-doubt to the point where you're meditating and you just know how to ignore all those dumb thoughts inside of your brain. And or you just have so much self-belief in yourself where people are like, that mofo is arrogant. But you're arrogant, that self-belief in yourself allows you to do so much. Right? The self-belief in yourself allows you to ignore all the outside forces where you're contacting people. Oh, for some reason it's not working. It allows you to ignore all the outside stuff because you have so much self-belief in yourself, right? And so that's kind of what happens with the self-doubt. And then the mental aspect, this is something you really need to be aware of is, man, this thing on Instagram keeps falling. So let's see if I can do this. There we go. I think Instagram's just going to be prepared for this thing to keep falling. All right. So anyways, when you're actually contacting events and everything, what you also need to be aware of is if you have something to fall back on, you're more likely to quit. And this is why I really think this is literally one of the biggest reasons as to why I succeeded, whereas all the other entertainers and speakers I talked with in the past, they struggled and they pretty much didn't at this point, right? The reason is because they had other jobs to fall back on, or maybe they had a spouse who would support them as well, right? I had none of that. I literally had nothing to fall back on. Literally. All I was doing was restaurant magic at the time. I was sitting there. I tried to get myself hired as a corporate entertainer, then switched to corporate speaker. And because I had nothing to fall back on, I had to make it work. So I had to send out a minimum of 100 emails a day. I had to do whatever it took to contact events, find events, contact them, pitch them, and everything. If, on the other hand, if you have a job, you don't need to succeed. Sure, succeeding would be great, but you don't need it because you do have money in the bank. You do have money coming in every month from a job. You do have this thing coming in every month, or your spouse can possibly support the fact that, sure, you're not making a lot of money with speaking yet, but maybe eventually you will. Your spouse can support that. And so you know this in the back of your mind, you know this. And so you're not likely to contact as many people because you have something to fall back on, right? And since you have that, you're not as desperate as you need to be. You literally need to be to a point of desperation in the beginning, like literally to a point where you're like damn near in tears, like I got to make this thing work, right? You're in a point where you're desperate, no, I wouldn't say desperate. I would say uncomfortable. You need to be very uncomfortable, but not desperate, really. So if you're desperate, then what's going to happen is, let's say you'll quit your job and you won't have a lot of money in the bank. And that's desperation. You quit your job. You have $100 in the bank. You're like, I got to make this work in 30 days, right? That's just dumb. That's flat out stupid. So you don't want to do that, but you do need to be uncomfortable. So let's say you have $1,000 in the bank and you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to tell my job, I'm going to do part-time. I'm only working part-time because I got to do this thing with speaking, right? And so you're not desperate. You still have money. You're getting money from the check coming in, even though it's part-time, is very little. You're not desperate, but you're uncomfortable at this point. You're like, oh shit, I got to make this thing work, right? So you got to make yourself uncomfortable. Self-doubt plus being comfortable equals you quitting. And so you have to get rid of the self-doubt and get rid of being comfortable. The self-doubt, what's going to happen is as you're doing stuff, as you're contacting events or you're prospecting, whatever, right? The self-doubt is going to kick in. Like, oh, this stuff, I don't know if cold emailing works. I don't know if cold calling works. Oh, what do I say to them? How do I fall? The self-doubt is going to kick in, right? Then the fact that you're comfortable, the fact that you don't need the money yet. Like, sure, you'd love to have it, but you don't really need it to happen. You're comfortable, the self-doubt, you're like, oh, well, because you got nothing to lose. Like if you quit, there's literally nothing to lose. You're in the same spot as you are today if you just stop, right? And so that's why you got to be aware of the self-doubt. You got to be aware of not getting comfortable, because the more comfortable you are, the less likely you're going to do anything. And so you just got to make sure that you're always uncomfortable. The hardest thing that's going to happen to you when it comes to prospecting is just getting out of your own way. And this is why, like when I talk with all these entrepreneurs, real estate agents, insurance agents, speakers, coaches, consultants, fitness trainers, a ton of people, right? Every single one of them, every person who hasn't made $1 million yet, they are in their own way. Like literally a lack of focus. Maybe they're just not as focused as they need to be. They're like, I'm going to do podcasts and webinars, get speaking gigs. I'm going to produce content. They're just not focused yet. And so there's all the focus. There's that shiny object syndrome that pops up all the time. There's a lot of clouded thinking that's going on inside of your brain. So you're basically not really sure about what you want, and you're not clear about what it is you want. So this, for example, when people say a bad example is when you say, I want to become an expert in the industry, right? So that's kind of like the big thinking. That's not clear thinking. That's just like vision thinking, right? On the other hand, if you say, all right, we need to sell this online fitness product. I got an online fitness product. I got to sell this thing. That's very clear about what it is you need to do. When you say, I want to become an expert, it's not clear. It's like, okay, become an expert, but what exactly do I do? On the other hand, if you're like, I got to sell this online program, then it makes it very clear about what your end game is. And so I noticed that just a lack of focus, clouded thinking, little things like that, it gets in your way. And also thinking the whole thing of it can't be that easy. It's simple. I guess I'd say it's simple, but it's not easy, because it's not easy because of a mental game that you're playing with yourself. And so when we think it can't be that easy, we make it complicated. And so I tell everybody, I'm like, look, the only thing you literally need to do to get booked is you have to have a great website and you reach out to events. That's all you do. You have a great website, you send out emails. Bam, that's it. No podcast, none of that stuff. You don't need a book, none of that stuff. But what happens is we make it complicated. We're listening to everybody talk. Everybody's like, you got to become an expert. You got to have a book to position yourself as an expert. Create all this content stuff. That way people see your content and everything, right? And so what naturally happens is we don't think, oh, that's all I need, a website, and just send out emails. Nah, I'm sure I got to have a podcast. So-and-so says I got to have a podcast. I'm sure I got to create some videos. I got to create some videos. I'm sure I got to write a book. And so we make it complicated. And so another example, for example, when you're actually building your brand, your personal brand, you're trying to sell programs and everything, all you literally have to do is traffic and an offer. That's all. Traffic and offer. You get eyeballs through Facebook ads, Google ads, or whatever. You get eyeballs onto an offer, something you sell to people. But we make it complicated. We're like, I got to do a webinar sales video. I got to do this. I got to create all this content. We make it complicated. And so in the beginning, you're making things complicated. And then, of course, the other aspect are the excuses. The excuses, it's a big thing. The excuses come across as reasons, and they sound legit to us. Like, oh, yeah, but Benji, you're in the U.S. I'm in a different country. Oh, yeah, but your speaking topic is different. My topic is very different, right? Or I got to do X first. I got to write a book first before I start actually contacting the events and everything. I got to make sure that I got my book done. And so we come up with all these excuses, all these reasons. Like nowadays it's different, right? So we're coming up with all these excuses. That's literally getting in your way. You just don't see it. And then what after all that, you have to prepare for the lag time. And this is why I tell everyone, all the speakers, I'm like, look, there's going to be a lag time between when you contact events and when you get hired by those events. So I noticed this because in the beginning, like I was contacted so many, it was stupid. I'm literally surprised I was not blacklisted. Like my email and website wasn't blacklisted because I contacted so many. It was ridiculous. And so after like a year of me contacting, so I'm contacting, sure, I'm getting booked and everything, but it wasn't until like a year later of me just going full force and stuff. It was a year later when gigs really started kicking in. It was like people like, hey, Benji, yeah, I got your email and everything. And I'm thinking like, wait, when did I send this person an email, right? And I'm thinking, oh, no, snaps. Like they got my email 8 months ago. Like, oh, this person, they got my email 9 months ago, right? And sure, we had a brief conversation. They said something like, we'll keep your information on file or something like that. But it started 8 months ago or a year ago. And then all of a sudden, a year later, they finally come to me saying, hey, we've got a Christmas party. Hey, we've got this party. We've got this event going on. We'd love to bring you in. And so there's this huge lag time that people aren't prepared for. When you're not prepared for that lag time, you're thinking, oh, 2 weeks have gone by, a month has gone by, nothing has happened, you haven't gotten a gig yet, you're not prepared for the lag time, and then once again, you're like, oh, this stuff doesn't work, I'm just going to give up. And so you have to prepare for that lag time. What really did it for me with the lag time was the Remax gig. So I contacted this meeting planner like a year beforehand, right? The meeting planner, they did what pretty much all meeting planners do. Like, yeah, I'll keep your information on file. Okay, cool. I'm like, all right, cool, great. I'll never hear from them again. Then like a year later, she was like, hey, yeah, you actually contacted me a while ago and I've actually got a gig for you. It's a gig with Remax and everything. I'm like, oh, snaps, right? And so that was the moment when several things kicked into play. Like I realized, hey, cold email and action, it really, really does work. Like a lot of things in terms of what I realized at that moment, but you got to understand the lag time. You got to be prepared for that lag time. Just think of it as you're farming, right? So you're planting seeds and it takes a moment for it to grow. You can't just plant it and you're like, mother, come on, man, stupid. You can't pour more water on it. There's nothing you can do to get that thing to go faster. Like literally nothing. If you pour more water on it, let's say you follow up more, you're following up with emails, you're following up with events every single day, you're pouring more water on it, you're going to kill it, right? They're going to be like, dude, stop emailing me every day, you dummy. I told you when we have an event, I will contact you. Now I ain't contacting you, you stupid idiot. Stop. Unsubscribe, right? So you'll piss them off if you follow up too much. So you got to think of it as you're planting a seed. And so when you're planting the seed, no amount of extra water, none of that stuff is actually going to allow it to grow faster. You just have to plant it and then be prepared for how to work it the right way and like know when to water it, know what sunlight needs to hit it, all that sort of stuff, right? And so the same goes with you getting the gigs. You just got to be prepared for that. And then what's going to happen after finally like someone does contact you, either you will get booked, which is great, or what's going to happen more often is you'll get there almost, and then they're going to ghost your ass. Like that's what's going to happen. Like they're going to be like, oh, what do you charge? And okay, well, I charge $10,000. Okay, cool. Yeah, send us a contract. Okay, cool. Here's the contract. Did you get the contract? I sent it to you. We need the contract back sometime soon if you want to secure the date. So are you still interested in hiring someone? Huh. And that's what's going to happen, right? You're going to get all excited in the last minute. They're just going to ghost your ass. And so you got to be prepared for that as well. That one, it really, really hurts. That one really, really sucks. You got to overcome constant frustration. The frustration is constant. As you're prospecting, especially when you're prospecting, there's going to be so much frustration, it's ridiculous. And this is going to just be because a lack of knowledge, a lack of experience in general. And so like it's going to feel slow. Your website is going to suck in the beginning. Your pitch isn't going to be right. You're not going to know how to use the CRM the right way. Events, they're going to respond to you. Then they're going to stop responding to you. So there's going to be a lot of frustration. You got to learn to overcome the frustration. And eventually what's going to happen though is you'll get into a rhythm. Like eventually you're going to realize, all right, here's how I find a lot of events really fast. Here's how I contact them really fast. Eventually you'll get into a rhythm. You'll get one gig through cold email and you'll be like, oh, this shiznit works. And you're going to get all excited. Like, yes, it works. I got a 10. You're going to get all excited, right? At this point. And so, this is once again, this is when Remax, when I got booked by Remax, that's when it really did it for me. I was like, yes, right? And so, eventually you'll get into this rhythm. And once you get into the rhythm, like it's just going to go from there. You're like, damn, this is a lot easier than I thought and everything. This is one of the things where I would do little things like turn sales prospecting into a game in terms of, all right, so instead of me just in 90 minutes, I found 30 events. So in the next 90 minutes, I'm going to find 35 events, right? And so it's like I was playing a game with myself. I was getting myself into a rhythm. And that's what's going to happen to you eventually. Eventually, you'll get booked. You'll be like, oh, snaps. You'll get into this rhythm of, I know how to find events. I know how to contact them. I know what to say to follow up. I know all this stuff. You'll get into that rhythm. And then bam, what'll happen is you'll associate prospecting with money. You'll associate prospecting with getting booked. And then once that association kicks in, it can never leave you at that point. It's like when I see a phone, right? I see a phone and I think money. I see a camera, I think money, right? Because I've associated phone, camera, I've associated it with generating revenue in a business. And the same is going to happen with prospecting. When you actually generate revenue, when you actually get booked, then you're going to start associating prospecting with revenue generation. And then you won't waste a lot of time at that moment. At that moment, you're going to realize, all right, let me start prospecting more. It won't be that much of a chore to you because you're like, all right, the more I prospect, the more revenue I generate, right? And then what's going to happen is you'll get to a point like Dave to where the hardest part is you trying to figure out how to keep track of everything. Like he actually posted inside the group one time. He's like, hey, I'm getting so many follow-up tasks. Like, what do I do, right? And he no longer had the frustration of contacting events or anything. It was a matter of he associated getting booked with prospecting. He associated it because he was getting booked with prospecting. And then it was just a matter of, all right, now how do you like organize everything, like get really, really organized? And so that's what's going to happen in the beginning, or that's what's eventually going to happen once you get into the rhythm. A lack of knowledge on your part is going to hold you back. The lack of knowledge is in terms of you don't know how to pitch the right way. The website isn't as great as you think it is. You don't know how to follow up. You don't have the templates in place. You don't have the pipeline. None of that stuff like in place. So the lack of knowledge is going to cause you to go a lot slower. It's just going to cause things to be a lot harder. Like you just don't know what to do. You won't be doing the things the right way if you are doing the things. So the first thing is you got to make sure that you're doing the right things. You're doing those things right. If you're not, then no amount of you persisting is going to work. So if you're not doing the right things, or if you're doing the right things but you're not doing those things right, no amount of persistence will cause you to get booked. No amount of persistence can make up for a lack of skill. It can't make up for a lack of knowledge. So this is why I keep telling people, if you're not a member of the Speak Pro Academy and you seriously want to get booked, you have to join because, like I said, there's no amount of skill or there's no amount of persistence that's going to allow you to actually overcome a lack of skill. And so that's what's going to happen to you mentally when you're actually prospecting, when you're trying to reach out to events. So make sure you go through that. Make sure you anticipate everything that's going to happen. Just understand that. Let's see if there were any questions as I was going through. So Alex said, are promo packets still used by speakers or strictly digital? I hope nobody's using promo packets. If you guys are using promo packets, then you need to slap yourself. Like just slap yourself silly. Just like get one of those, get like an arm that maybe goes back and forth or something on a robot and just stand there and just let it slap yourself. Just slap yourself silly. Like if you're still using promo packets. In a digital age, this is one of the reasons why I keep telling people, if you have a speaker bio, if you have a one sheet, you don't need it. Your speaker bio is your about page on your website. That's literally what your speaker bio is. Your one sheet is your website. You do not need anything printed ever. Like to sell yourself, you don't need anything printed. Your one sheet is your website. Your bio is your about page on your website. And so when people ask for this stuff, they say, send me your speaker bio. You send them to your about page on your website. The reason is because when they go to the about page, what's going to naturally happen? They're going to click around to other parts of your website. They're going to see the videos and they're going to get even more convinced of bringing you in. And so that's why you don't send a one sheet. You don't send a bio. That's not what you really need, especially nowadays. All right. Alex said you have one. Get rid of it, Alex. Do the thing. Go buy one of the arms that slaps yourself on a robot. Make sure you don't have a promo packet. All right. So let's see. Clarence said the potential client wants to talk with my VA. all right, about the band and what to expect. I followed the pipeline to a T, and I was wondering, how should I handle this? Should I have a phone conversation or just explain the process via email? All you got to do is you just say, like, Clarence deals with that. So I'll connect you with Clarence, right? That's all you got to do. So if someone says, like, oh, I'd love to talk to you as the VA, there's no reason for them to talk to any VA. It's like, no, Clarence deals with that. So that's what you're doing at that point. So you said, if you FedEx a bio, won't you stand out because no one else is using them? No, because once again, you got to remember, what do I want? I'm hiring either an entertainer, a speaker. I'm hiring somebody, right? A piece of paper shows me what exactly? Nothing. It doesn't show me what they're like on a stage. It doesn't show me how they're sitting there like getting everyone jumping up and down. Yeah, let's go. It doesn't show me that. It's a still image. If there are still images on there, usually they just have a ton of text on it, which really defeats the point. But it doesn't show me any of that. I'm looking for someone in terms of what are they like on a stage. And so when you send me a link to your website and I can click on a video and I can see that, that trumps everything. It doesn't matter in terms of, you can send me your book. You can send me brand new shoes. You can send me an iPad. You can send me a car. None of that matters in terms of me hiring you as a speaker for our Remax event. Because if I hire a bad speaker, if you step on a stage and you suck, the CEO is going to be like, Benji, what the hell? Like, you seriously hired this guy? What the hell? Yeah, but he gave me a car. He gave me a book. His book was great. He gave me this bio, this sheet and stuff. It was amazing. It looked great. It stood out from everybody. I got it in the mail. It stood out from everybody, and so, I had to bring him in, right? The CEO's going to be like, you didn't even check to see if he was a great speaker from the get-go? What? You didn't watch a video of the guy? And so that's why when people say stand out, it's like, you can stand out all you want, but that's not what's going to get you hired, right? And so you got to make sure that you're doing the things that's going to get you hired. All right, but understand, be prepared for the mental game of the situation, because if you're not prepared mentally, then you're going to get crushed in terms of the actually doing everything. So make sure you watch this, rewatch it. I'm telling you guys, if there's one thing that's going to literally destroy you, it's going to be the mental game. And this is with all aspects of building a business. It's none of it is hard. Like, literally, everything you do is very simple. What happens is we make it complicated. There's self-doubt. You're comfortable. You're not prepared for how long it's going to actually take. There's all these little things, like you're not as focused as you need to be. All these little things that pop up. And because you're not prepared for things like that, because you're not prepared for the frustration, you quit. On the other hand, if you're prepared if you're ready for the frustration to happen, you push through it. It's very similar to like a bodybuilder, right? If you look at a bodybuilder in a gym and then look at a normal person in a gym, look at them. Let's say they're doing curls, right? They're sitting there, they're doing curls. If you look at a normal person in a gym, here's what happens. They're like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they're done, right? That's what happens with a normal person, right? A bodybuilder goes like this. They're like, and then their friend goes, one more. And then they like try to do one more, right? And so that's what happens with a bodybuilder. The reason why a bodybuilder builds their muscle is because they don't quit when everyone else does. So everyone else quits at the moment of pain, the moment of frustration. They're like, That's what happens with everyone else. Bodybuilders like, you start hearing all this stuff in the gym like, dude, what the hell? And so, but that's why a bodybuilder builds the muscle. And so when you're actually prospecting, what's going to happen is the same situation is going to happen. You're going to get uncomfortable. You're going to get frustrated. And the people who don't succeed are going to quit at that moment of frustration, at the moment of self-doubt and uncomfort. You're going to quit at that moment. Whereas you push through it because you recognize that you're like, okay, I know I'm going to get frustrated. I know this is going to suck. I know I'm going to do a ton of things wrong. And then you push through it to make it right? So that's what happens. All right. Cool. So we are good to go for today. So once again, guys, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So thanks everybody for showing up. I will see you guys tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Take care, everybody.